Thank you very much. I really have to tell you how much I appreciate you letting me give new presentations. That I've never given that presentation before, and I wouldn't do it any place that I felt uncomfortable. But I know I can make a few mistakes and get a little carried away, and you guys will be tolerant. Likewise, we've never sold the DVDs before either. We received those DVDs. I had them shipped in Saturday Federal Express yesterday just to have them here. This is the first time they've been sold. And we thought, we were trying to figure out what to do, what to sell them for, because we really want to get the information out. But likewise, we don't want you to just throw it in the corner and say it's not worth anything. But we've sold over 2,000 of them at $120 a piece. And I felt, well, let's see if everybody can afford this price, and that's pretty much as you're getting pretty close to our costs on these things. Anyway, they're the lectures that I gave for 16 years at St. Helena Hospital, and still I'm going to give part of one of the lectures here today if we get time. And they are the core of the McDougall program. It's 5.5 hours of information on DVD on that particular presentation. And if you would have paid for that 2 years ago at St. Helena Hospital, you'd have paid $5,600 to hear those lectures. That's what it costs. The other thing, somebody asked, how can you support Neil and I and Howard and so on? Well, I think the best way to do it is just go spread the information. I think you need to tell your friends and neighbors the truth, if you're strong enough, because they're going to be upset with you, just like I'm sure a lot of people were offended by what I just had to say. The truth hurts people, and especially when you hear it the first time. But if you're strong enough to take the backlash, you're tough enough to be thought of as an alien or a criminal, then go for it, because you'll eventually save lives, and then somebody you'll help, just like Mary and I have a chance to help every day. And it'll feel so good to help other people. It's what everything in life is about, and you know that. And we have that opportunity every day, and I encourage you to go out with the good news, like you have with the news about the Lord. Go out and tell people. The truth about good nutrition is vital for people to know. And you'll receive the same kind of reaction you've received with your religious message too. But it doesn't mean that it's not important to spread it. There's an epidemic of sickness there, you know it, in your friends and relatives. And most of the people who are sick can get well. Our God-given bodies are absolutely amazing if you give them half a chance. You will clean the arteries out, you'll lose the weight, the bowels will work, the indigestion will go away, the arthritis will improve or stop. I mean, it's just amazing what happens. One of the things I've always questioned in my life is all of this, quote, limitation, and I don't feel it's limitation, because those of you who eat like I do know what a bountiful supply of good food this is. It's the best food there is. In fact, we still feel sorry for people who eat yellow and brown food that tastes of grease and salt, right? They just don't know better. But say there was some effort in the limitation that I've imposed upon myself for the last 30 years. Sometimes I would stop along the way and say, is it really worth it? I mean, is it really worth the trouble? Is there a difference I'm making in my life? Now, Mary is not 20 years old. Mary's in my next decade, will be 60. Okay? And you wonder sometimes whether all this is worth the trouble. Well, I had a good experience recently with in fact, my best friend. Even though he's my best friend, he hasn't listened to me. He hasn't listened to me for the 17 years we've been best friends. And part of the reason is he gets very little support at home. So he and his wife are not working as a team, which is really essential to accomplish any good things in life, to have a good family relationship. And so he has been sabotaged, and he's sabotaged himself over the years. Well, he's my age, 56 years old. He medically retired this year. He spent, since January, he's been in the hospital at least 6 times with kidney stones, back problems so bad that he can't get up, and he's medically retired. One time when he was in the hospital, I called him up and I said, would you ask the doctors if they have anything for sore muscles? I've been windsurfing all day. He didn't think that was funny. You see, what you and I do is easy. It's easy to eat oatmeal, to eat mushu vegetables and chili and rice. That's easy. To go for a walk is easy. To do what your friends and relatives are doing is mercilessly difficult. to spend hours in the doctor's office waiting for their refills, to suffer in terrible pain, to not be able to go on vacations or enjoy their family because they're fat and sick. That's painful, that's difficult. And so I can see now at my age, at my mid-50s, people falling apart around me. And I think probably one of the best examples of all this is Mary's parents. Mary's parents did not understand the importance of good diet until they were 70 years old. Mary's dad used to come to visit me in Hawaii all the time, and he'd make me take him to the hospital to get his bowels x-rayed because he was in such pain. And he still wouldn't learn the message. Oh, they got it a little bit, and after 3-4 days at our house, all his bowel pain went away, but he still wouldn't make this serious connection and went home and ate the same garbage. Finally, he lost the front side of his heart, and he said, I'm going to learn. I got the message. Well, last summer, if you go to the website and you read under Star McDougallers, the stars of all Star McDougallers, you'll see some interesting pictures. Joel Knowles is here. Joel was with us on our Alaskan trip last summer in June. Well, Josiah Knowles saw Mary's parents kayaking among the icebergs at 91 years old. Okay? So it's never, ever too late. Mary's parents often go, in fact, they usually go on the trips with us. They won't be going to Costa Rica this time because they've been 4 times with us in the past, and they said they've seen it all. But my mother will be there. She's 80 years old. And so, you know, this is really what you want in life. You'll see me out in the bay windsurfing with the kids when I'm 85 years old. And I'll be the last one out of the water. I guarantee you. So let's see. Let me just tell you a little bit. Let me just give you a little bit of a short presentation that's on one of the DVDs. And it's one of my favorites, and I know you haven't seen it before, but I think it's worth sharing with you because it's such a serious problem. It's the problem of obesity in this country. Obesity in this country is an epidemic, and it's an escalating epidemic. And why? You know, we've had similar rich foods around for 100 years. Why are so many people getting so fat so fast? It's just so easy to get this rich food. You don't even have to get out of the car. You just go from one fast food restaurant to the next. And that's why they're in trouble. And they're making it so delicious, so full of sugar and salt, and so full of fat that people just can't resist it. And so you walk through the mall or the supermarket, and you look at the people around you, and you go, my goodness, I can hardly believe it. What are the statistics? Well, in 1991, 18% of the U.S. population was obese. In 1998, it was 18%. In 2003, the figures are as high as 30% of the people are obese. Now, to be obese, you have to be carrying around another half a person. 65% of people are too fat for their health. Somewhere around 25% of children are too fat for their health. So we have a major epidemic, and why is this so? It's because people do not eat the foods intended for human beings. I believe the food intended for people is starch, vegetables, and fruits. When I say starch, I mean things like rice, corn, potatoes. I don't mean like potato chips and French fries. Rice, corn, potatoes, beans, peas, lentils, whole grains, with the addition of fruits and vegetables. I believe this is the best diet for the human being. I've spent 30 years taking care of people this way, and I will change my belief if I find any reason to do it. Now you say, well, how about all those people who say the Atkins diet is the way to be healthy and lose weight? You know, Atkins, who slipped on the ice in April in New York. Sure. Anyway, by the way, the year before, he had a massive cardiac arrest and almost died, but this had no relation to the ice in New York a year later. Anyway, why did they say the Atkins diet is so good? They say the Atkins diet is so good. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago in the New England Journal of Medicine, they had 2 articles that said the Atkins diet is better than a high-carbohydrate diet like I teach. Yeah. Now, you'll read what I'm going to say if you go to the website, www.drmcdougall.com, under Breaking News or last month's newsletter. You'll read what I'm going to tell you right now in case you want to review it. 2 articles in the New England Journal of Medicine said that a low-carbohydrate, high-protein, high-fat diet like the Atkins diet is healthier for you with better weight loss than a high-carbohydrate, low-fat diet like I recommend. How could I argue it was in the New England Journal of Medicine? Well, The reason I can argue is because this is fraud, absolute fraud. You know what they did? Is they took the Atkins diet and they compared it against a, quote, high carbohydrate diet. You know what the high carbohydrate, low fat diet was? The people in the study, in one of the studies, the other one was similar, but I'll just tell you about one of them. In one of the studies, the fat content of the diet, before they started the diet, the fat content of the people's diet was 33% fat. The goal was 30% fat. At the end of the study, they looked at what they were eating, and they were eating 33% fat. That was the low-fat diet. At best, it was a moderate fat diet, and the truth is it was just a calorie restriction diet, and we know that calorie restriction diets don't work. Starving yourself hurts, and as a result, people can't stick with them, and so they go back to eating, they get fat and sick again. It's fraud. What they published was fraud. They never compared the diet to what Dr. Bernard and Dr. Hans Deal and myself and Nathan Pritikin and Dean Ornish recommend. We recommend a diet of 7% fat. But the titles of the article would make you believe that we were proven to be incorrect. It's fraud, and they get away with it. I don't know what the motivation was behind it. I can only guess that those doing the study like to eat a high-fat, high-protein diet. I don't know where the money is. I haven't been able to trace it. So we have this idea that the way to get healthy is to eat a high-protein diet, right? The Atkins kind of diet. You do lose weight on that kind of diet. You also lower your cholesterol. You also lower your blood sugar. You also lower your blood pressure and your triglycerides in that kind of diet. And let me tell you why. It's because you get sick. The diet makes people sick. It says so right in the study. They become nauseated, fatigued. They become sick. And when you get sick, you don't eat. And when you don't eat, your weight goes down, and your blood pressure goes down, and your cholesterol goes down, and your triglycerides go down, and your blood sugar goes down because you're sick. And these people look sick too. Look at them. They're sallow, they're gray. The Canadian Army, back in World War II, was put on a diet of pemmican. This is a diet that is just like the Atkins diet. 70% fat, 30% protein. After 3 days, they were incapable of fighting. The doctors looked at the soldiers and found them sallow, gray, fatigued, and incapable of battle. The diet works because it makes you sick. What happens when you don't have carbohydrate in your diet, like is on the Atkins diet, what happens is you burn fat, because that's all that's available for energy. A byproduct of fat metabolism is ketones. Ketones suppress the hunger drive. God designed the body to go into ketosis under two circumstances. One is if you are seriously ill. When you're seriously ill, you're not supposed to be gathering and preparing food. You're supposed to be recuperating. So you burn fat, produce ketones, suppress your hunger drive so you can rest. The other time is a God-given blessing, and that is when you're starving to death, you go into ketosis so it doesn't hurt so bad to die. After about 3 days, you go into ketosis, and the pain of hunger makes death more tolerable. So the Atkins diet simulates sickness. A natural thing that the body is designed to do is what the Atkins diet does. I'll tell you a similar circumstance, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but it's the best example I can give you of how the Atkins diet works. There's another way to lose lots of weight. Lower your cholesterol, always happens. Lower your triglycerides, blood sugar, blood pressure. All those risk factors, which was our lecture last year when I was here, all those risk factors get go down when you do the following. You take cancer chemotherapy. I'm not joking. You can find the research in the literature. You get sick from these drugs. You lose your hair, your appetite, your weight, your cholesterol, your blood sugar, etc. go down. I don't see doctors bragging about weight loss or cholesterol drops or blood pressure reductions in their patients that go on cancer chemotherapy. Do you? Well, they're doing the same thing when they put their patients on the Atkins diet. Shame on them. And if you know any doctors that do that, you tell them they will pay for this. Because what they're doing is a serious mistreatment of their patients. And they should know better. Well, I didn't come to talk about that. You guys get me all carried away. All right, what I want to talk to you about is effortless, painless weight loss. I want to tell you what it is in terms of how to lose weight effortlessly. And if you learn these 3 principles I'm going to share with you, you will forever be in control of your health. This lecture is on the videos. It goes over an hour. I don't have an hour to give it to you, but this lecture, I'm going to give it to you in 10 minutes now. Painless, effortless, permanent, highly effective weight loss. It has to be that way. If you believe in God, if you believe in the correctness of nature, it could be no other way. There has to be a set of rules so that when you get hungry, you eat. The food matches the size of the stomach, matches your hunger drive, matches your activity level, right? It has to be that way. It shouldn't be that when you get hungry, you eat, you get fat and sick. It makes no sense. Have you looked out into the world and see how beautiful it's designed, how symbiotic everything lives together, how wonderfully everything works? Why is it the human being works so poorly? Why is it that when we eat, we have to count every morsel that passes our lips, every calorie that we consume, otherwise we'll get fat and sick, and we still get fat and sick? Why is it? It's because we're not following the right set of rules. There has to be a set of rules that works for us. And that set of rules, by the way, is described in the Bible. Not only in Genesis, but the first chapter of Daniel. Daniel was the first one I know of who described my medical practice. His men were sick because they were eating at the king's table. He said to the gatekeeper, let's do a non-randomized, non-double-blind, non-controlled study. Let's take and put my 3 men on vegetables and water and see what happens in 10 days. And then what happened? Daniel reported what happened, exactly what happens in my program. By the way, our program is 10 days. Sorry, Daniel. Exactly what happens in our program, and that is in 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than the king's men. The truth has been observed throughout human history. This is nothing you have to be a scientist or a doctor to understand. People have seen it thousands of years ago. It's still true today. If you eat like a king and queen, you get fat and sick like kings and queens. That's it. So you eat at Burger King, Dairy Queen, Imperial Margarine, you're fat and sick. That's it. Okay. So let me teach you 3 principles of permanent effortless weight loss that describe these 3 principles that were created long before you and I ever thought of being on this earth. The first principle is the principle of calorie dilution. What I want to do is I want to feed you all for 2 days. I want to feed you 1,500 calories a day. I'm going to feed you 500 calories per meal. That's 3 meals a day. That's 1,500 calories a day. I picked 500 calories because 500 calories 3 times a day is 1,500 calories, which is not a lot of food. In fact, none of you are going to get fat on 1,500 calories. A tiny woman, like this lady right here, sitting there sleeping in a chair, will burn 1,200 calories a day. So you're not going to gain on my 1,500 calorie diet. Plus, I divide it into 3 meals, 500 calories per meal. That's an easy number to remember. So I'm going to feed you 500 calorie meals 3 times a day. Now, the first thing you try and do when you eat is you try and fill up the stomach, right? So that's the first bit of satisfaction you get is from filling up the stomach. Let's take a look at what happens when you eat 500 calorie meals. Let's start out with breakfast. Let's have 500 calories of butter. This is the size of your stomach. This is what 500 calories will do in terms of satisfying your hunger drive. Do you feel satisfied? That could be margarine, that could be olive oil, salad dressing. That's all it does to fill in your stomach. Now, let's see. For lunch, we're going to have 500 calories of cheese. If I wasn't watching carefully, I know some of you eat 3 times that much, not allowed. Now, for dinner, we'll have 500 calories of beef. Here, I've fed you 1,500 calories, just like I promised. You're starving. You're ready to eat the paint off the refrigerator. You're upset with me, to say the least. Now, let's see. To keep you from getting mad and going home, I'll start out with breakfast, 500 calories of rice. Now we'll go on to lunch. Let's have 500 calories of corn. Fill that stomach all the way up with corn. And now for dinner, we'll have potatoes, 500 calories of potatoes. Couldn't get them all in the stomach. We could have 500 calories for dessert of M&Ms the first day. This is 1 pack, folks. You know, one of those big jumbo-sized packs, those big deals? 500 calories. There it is right there, a tiny part of your stomach. Or you could have 500 calories of fruit. When you switch from the rich American diet to the diet that I recommend that most of you eat right now, you change the calorie concentration of the food 4-fold. In other words, now you take in 1/4 as many calories for the same volume of food. But, good news, instead think, now I can eat twice as much food and take in half as many calories. Neat. It's fun to eat. It feels good. we're intended to eat. The hunger drive is not wrong. It is not your enemy if you eat the right kinds of foods. So the first principle is the principle of calorie dilution. We go from calorie-dense foods to calorie-dilute foods. The second principle has to do with the fat content of the food, and so you need to know the fat content. 100% fat, 70% fat, 60 to 90% fat. Rice is 5%, corn 9%, potatoes 1% fat, fruits and vegetables 4% fat. You got those all memorized? Okay. When we eat, the body does the most efficient thing possible with everything we eat. So it takes all of the substances and properly distributes them in the most economical way possible. So when we eat, we take in protein, we take in carbohydrate, and we take in fat. Those are the 3 calorie-giving substances. The body most efficiently takes the protein, utilizes it for its best advantage. It takes and builds things. It builds cell walls and hormones. It does not burn it for energy, except under bizarre circumstances like starvation or being on the Atkins diet. Otherwise, it does not burn protein for energy. It'd be like burning your oak furniture to keep warm instead of common firewood. It's wasteful. The body does not store protein. As we talked about in the last lecture, the body takes and dumps the protein out of the kidneys and takes the bones with it. The body doesn't store protein. Now, when we eat carbohydrate, the body does the most efficient thing possible with the carbohydrate we eat. Remember, all the way from high school biology, they taught you carbohydrate was to run the machinery. That's how your body gets energy. And so the body utilizes carbohydrate for energy. If you take in more carbohydrate than you need to run the machinery for the day, what the body will do is take 2 pounds of it, store it invisibly in your muscles and liver as glycogen. 2 pounds invisibly. If you take more than you need to run the machinery, more than the 2 pounds for your daily to store as glycogen, what the body will do with any further excess is it will burn it off. The body does not convert carbohydrate into fat under ordinary circumstances. I don't care how many lies the paperback book industry diet doctors tell you. Carbohydrate does not turn into sugar, which turns into fat. It's complete scientific nonsense. You can go to the literature, read it, and you'll see what garbage they teach people. It is too economically wasteful to do that under ordinary circumstances. It will under extreme circumstances. I mean, the way they do this is they do it in laboratories. They take people, they sit them in chairs, you can't move very much because you might burn up some of those calories, and they feed them loads and loads of refined flour and sugar. And eventually, when you get past a certain point, the body will convert carbohydrate to fat. It does not do it under ordinary circumstances. Every scientist knows this. Everybody that promotes these, quote, high-protein diets doesn't. They don't know this. I tell them when we lecture and debate together, I tell them, but somehow they don't remember. So they keep teaching the same garbage. Okay, now, that's what happens to the carbohydrate. It is just burnt up in oxidative reactions, we call it. Now, the third substance that can be made into calories, that can be calories. The third substance, remember, there's protein, carbohydrate, and fat. The third is fat. The body does the most efficient thing possible with that fat. Well, folks, it's already in the form for storage. What do you think it's going to do with it? It moves it effortlessly from the fork and spoon through your bloodstream and sticks it in the fat cells. It does it effortlessly. So effortlessly, it doesn't even change the chemical structure of the fat. So I can take a needle, put it in your buttocks, thigh, or abdomen, I can suck the fat out, I can analyze it, and I can tell what you like to eat. If you like to eat cold water marine fish, you're going to be full of omega-3 fats. You like olive oil, you're going to be full of monounsaturated fats. If you like dairy products, you're going to be full of C15 and C17 fats, because that's what dairy has in it. So I could catch any of you if you didn't listen to the last lecture. The fat you eat is the fat you wear. Folks, that is the metabolic dollar. The metabolic dollar that the body saves for that day when no food is available, which never comes. It's never going to happen. So stop saving. Okay, so the third principle is most important for those of you who think you are psychologically deranged. Those who think you have a mental disorder. Those who think you're crazy. Why do you think you're crazy? Because all you do is think about food. All day long. You get up from a meal, you think about food, food, food. I'm crazy. Something's wrong with me. In fact, I think about it so much, I'll invent a name for myself. I'll call myself an obsessive-compulsive overeater. In fact, I'm so crazy, I'll go find somebody to call me names. I'll find a psychiatrist that'll tell me I have a diagnosis like an eating disorder. Well, folks, you may be crazy. You may be emotionally stressed and distressed. That all may be well. But the reason you think about food is not psychological. It's because you are hungry. That's why you think about food. There's nothing wrong with you psychologically to make you think about food. It's because you don't eat. You don't eat what satisfies the hunger drive. You have all kinds of drives, and they're satisfied by specific things, like the drive for money, power, sex, very specific things. Also, your other 3 drives are satisfied by very specific things. In fact, if you don't satisfy those 3 drives, you die. Like, breath is satisfied by, not air, oxygen. Air is too general. Thirst is satisfied by, not beer, not Coke, water. And hunger is satisfied by, not food, carbohydrate. That's like saying air when I ask you about breath. You have to be more specific. Oxygen. You leave oxygen out of that mixture of gases you call air, you'll be huffing and puffing and dead in 3 minutes. Oxygen. What satisfies hunger? Carbohydrate. And what is the carbohydrate content of these foods? 0. No carbohydrate in butter, margarine, olive oil, corn oil, safflower oil, health food, flaxseed oil, no carbohydrate. Cheese, 2%. Meat, chicken, fish, beef, pork, lobster, 0 carbohydrate. Carbohydrate content of these are 75 to 85% carbohydrate. You're not eating is why you're thinking about food. 2-3 days into my program that I run in Santa Rosa, 2-3 days into the program, every time, same thing happens. People come into the program, first day, we make double the amount of food that any normal person would eat because we know they're going to eat because they don't know what we're going to serve next. Oh, that was a good meal, but that was probably the last good one I'm going to get. So then they get the next good one. Oh, well, that's probably the last good one. So they eat mounds and mounds of food the first 2 or 3 days. We're prepared. We have lots of food for them. And pretty soon they find out the next meal is going to be great too. But what happens about the second, third day is they finally fill up their carbohydrate stores. Finally, they put the carbohydrate in the muscles, in the liver, and in the other tissues. They become sufficient in carbohydrate, and they stop that craving for something that is so necessary for good health, which is carbohydrate. And they become satisfied, and they feel a sense of well-being, a comfort that many of them have never known. They can get on with thinking about their job and their family instead of food all the time. It's a relief from a prison that they get after about 3 days of carbohydrate consuming. You knew this before you came here. You knew this because you remember your high school biology. They taught you on the tip of the tongue is one taste bud that seeks a calorie-given substance. What is that taste bud? It's for sugar, right? There's no taste bud for fat or protein on the tip of the tongue, only for carbohydrate. You are designed as a seeker of carbohydrate. God did not make a mistake, folks. You are designed with that sweet-tasting taste bud for a very, very important reason. It's essential for your well-being, your sense of well-being, your good health. Unfortunately, industry has discovered this, and so as a result, they put a ton of sugar in the milk and try and sell it to the kids. Yeah. They put it in 135 pounds of sugar in your food, all the way from baby food to geriatric supplements, because they know you're designed to like sugar. But the way that nature intended it was for you to like sugar, known as rice and potatoes and corn and fruit and maybe some honey once in a while, but not the 135 pounds they dump in your food. Okay, so now you got it. There's the 3 principles. When you switch from calorie-dense to calorie-dilute foods, from high-fat to low-fat, from low-carbohydrate to high-carbohydrate foods, you've got the solution to the problem. And let me tell you something else that's so neat, which will just make you amazed at the creation. Just think about this for a minute. These foods that make you thin also make you healthy. What a neat trick. These foods that make you thin also make you healthy. You're paying attention. I've got to check. These foods that make you fat also make you sick. Isn't that neat? These foods have no fiber. They're high in cholesterol, high in fat, highly contaminated because they're high in the food chain. They're full of all those E. coli and bovine this and bovine that and mad whatever. You know, they're all full of that stuff, right? These foods have high fiber, no cholesterol, low fat, high carbohydrate, clean, low on the food chain, least chemical contaminants. So when you go to the grocery store, you don't have to walk down the aisle and say, gee whiz, I think today I'll pick food that makes me thin, and tomorrow I'll pick food that makes me healthy. You don't have that choice. The same food that makes you thin also makes you healthy. The same foods that make you fat also make you sick. Well, why would it be any other way? It makes no sense. Nothing else makes any sense. Every aspect you can look at this from comes back up positive. The same food that makes you thin makes you healthy. It's the least expensive food. You cut your food bill by 40% at least when you change this kind of food. It's kind to the environment, as you've heard in this presentations over the weekend. This is how you save our natural resources. And if you haven't thought about it, it's also kind to animals. You know, nothing nice about serving a cow for dinner. It is also the same food that is recommended in every single religious teaching I have ever heard about, ever. Why would it not be? You think people are stupid? You think they were stupid 2,000 years ago when they wrote the Bible? You don't think they could see this? I don't see anybody recommending the Zone or the Atkins diet in the Bible. Huh? Anyway, when you pick this up, this is the nice thing, is you get to eat as much as you want, as often as you want, of the best tasting foods there are. We're talking about oatmeal for breakfast, hash brown potatoes, waffles and pancakes. Mary, who you met back here, she has put out over 2,000 recipes. Think about it, 2,000 recipes. And you are a monotonous creature. Let me tell you why I said that. Because today, you had the same thing for breakfast you had yesterday, and last week, and the week before. You eat the same thing for breakfast every day. I know you do. And for lunch, you eat the same thing for lunch. Maybe you have 2 or 3 different things. And for dinner, you switch among 3 or 4 different recipes. And when you go to a restaurant, I bet you every time you go to that restaurant, you order the same thing off that menu at that restaurant every time you go. I mean, you got about 6 things you like. That's it. And Mary put out 2,000 things for you in the recipes she's published. And by the way, you can have a couple hundred of them free. They're on the internet. Her last 200 great recipes are free on the internet and our website. But she also we have quite a few, 10 national best-selling books that they're in too. So all you're doing is you're trying to find 6 things out of 2,000 that you like. If you can't do that, you're not ready yet. So you get to eat as much food as you want, delicious food, cut your food bill, support your religious believings, the environment. You know, it just makes no sense not to do it. Why would you continue to take the hard way out? It makes no sense. It is so simple. In fact, sometimes I think it's too simple. Not for you folks, but for your neighbors. I think it's too simple. They don't want to hear it's this simple, this easy, this cost-free. And so I have a solution. Next year when I'm here, I'm going to have our new product. Comes in bottles of 100s and 200s. They're little green pills. There's nothing in them, but they have an M on the side. The M stands for money or McDougall, depends on the mood I'm in. And you can buy them for $1.75 a piece, and the diet and exercise program do not work unless you take 2 a day. Well, you asked for it, or your friends did. Let me just answer a couple of questions. We got 10 more minutes, and then we'll stop, okay? Because I know you're tired, you've got a long weekend. And so if I could just have a couple of questions. This presentation as well, it goes on for an hour, as well as the presentation in part I gave you on the dairy today is on there, and about heart disease and cancer, and 2 presentations by Mary are on the DVDs. It is an education that you won't believe. It's one of the highest quality things that you've ever seen in terms of DVD. And we're real proud to offer it, and hopefully we offered it at the right price for you. What kind of questions does anybody have? Yes, sir. Yes, in the white shirt. Is it okay to mix fruits and vegetables? In other words, do you have to food combine? Good question. Food combining, which is taught by the natural hygienists, I see no scientific or clinical value in it. Yet I see no reason not to do it. If you want to do it, fine, as long as you combine the right things. I see no need. And so we don't use food combining. If there is an advantage, it's so small it's not been perceptible to me. Now, you brought up an important thing that will lead me into another discussion, and that is the idea of combining foods to get all the amino acids. I started a fight last year, and I talked to you about it when I was here last year with the American Heart Association. I've had 2 articles published in the American Heart Association journal called Circulation in the last year. And the articles are about them supporting the idea that you have to combine different kinds of vegetable foods to get complete amino acids. It's complete nonsense. I called them on it. I asked them to admit their error. They refused to admit their error. You can read about this in my newsletter. I think I wrote about it in the November newsletter. I called the Heart Association on it. They published my letters twice, and still to this date, they will not admit that they're wrong. They won't say I'm wrong, but they won't admit that they're wrong. Our next action is to sue them. I have an attorney. We're going to sue them. The cost of suing the Heart Association has been estimated to be $100,000. Which brings up the question somebody asked a minute ago, I didn't completely answer. How do you support Neil Bernard and Howard Lyman and myself in this battle? Well, I have a nonprofit foundation that will be approved whenever the California approved it, whenever the federal government gets around to approving it in the next week or two, where we're going to take funds specifically for things that are important to you. Like, for example, I'll set up a fund to sue the American Heart Association. And if you want to contribute to it, as we get money, we'll pay attorney's fees, and I'm going to sue them. I'm going to sue them because they got to stop lying to you. Because if they tell you you can't get complete proteins in vegetables and it's not true, then that keeps you from eating these healthy foods. They're harming your family. I've told them that. They're causing death and disability to people by continuing to promote a message that is scientifically unsound. And you can read all about this if you go to the newsletter, go to the journal Circulation. You can read my letters and their response. But the only step I have left is to hire an attorney, and like I say, they say it'll cost $100,000, but I'll get it easy. I'll have no trouble raising $100,000, and I'll sue the buggers. But so there are organizations like that. I don't know where Howard, I know Neil is a nonprofit. You can contribute to Neil's organization. And you contribute to a lot of things. You contribute to United Way, you contribute to this organization, that organization. I think you ought to really think about where you're sending your money. Really. Because people like Neil Bernard and Howard Lyman and Hans Diehl and some of the other folks here, I mean, they're out for really tangible things that make a difference. Every time I see them do a leukemia marathon on TV or on the radio, my friend Jim Eason used to do that all the time on KGO, and Jim's a very close friend of mine. In fact, I talked to him yesterday. I'd say, Jim, how do you do this when those buggers know about the leukemia viruses in the dairy products? How do you do this with a clear conscience? I said, it's not well spent money. It's just not well spent time, Jim. But, you know, that they've got the edge on the market of collecting funds. So I think there are better ways to spend your money myself. You'll have to decide. But we will have, Neil has it already set up. I'll have it set up in the next month or two, and I don't know what Howard has. Oh, hey, there you go. Yes.
Could you address Mr. Barefoot's coral calcium promotion?
Coral calcium? Mm-hmm. You know, we have a bridge for sale. I can't believe it. I mean, a couple of years ago, it was Dead Doctors Don't Lie, and he sold you ancient coral calcium. And he ground up dirt and put it in a bottle and made a guy rich as it can be. The complete nonsense. It is snake oil. It's fraud. It's unbelievable. It's just money is all it is. And I can't believe the public buys it. I guess if you put it on TV enough and the FDA doesn't come down and put them in jail, that people think it's okay. It's fraud. It's fraud. It's not even placebo. It's just terrible. Yes.
You were with the Adventists for over 10 years. What you presented is more like what Ellen G. White said. The Adventists must love you to death. Did they support you when you were at St. Helena Sanitarium?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch all that.
Did the Adventists support you?
Oh, did the Adventists support me? Good question. I am not an Adventist, by the way. I am a Christian, but I'm not an Adventist. I am an honorary Adventist. I have worked with the Adventist health system ever since I started in medicine in 1972. I started at Castle Hospital in Honolulu, and I've worked with St. Helena Hospital up until last year. And the Adventists have been some of the greatest people that I've ever had a chance to work with, nicest folks. The problem is that they suffer from the ravages of the American diet with almost the same frequency as the rest of the population. The other problem is they've heard it so much, so often, that they're almost numb to the dietary message, and so it's a little hard to talk to them sometimes. But then on the other hand, they've heard it so much that when somebody who's a non-Adventist like me comes out and says it from a scientific point of view, I sometimes get a much better response. But I've had tremendous support. You think any other hospital would keep me in their walls for 16 years? They'd have gotten rid of that quack a long time ago.
Just have your face that way just a little bit when you talk.
And by the way, I left, it was my decision to leave, not theirs.
You talked about carbs satisfying the cells. So is there a difference? Are there good carbs, bad carbs? Are there certain kinds you should only eat to satisfy instead of going out and just having,
There are good carbs and bad carbs?
Right.
Sure there are.
What are the
Your refined carbohydrates are not healthy because they're concentrated, so they raise insulin levels very high, and they're also empty calories. They don't have the vitamins, minerals, fibers, phytates, and so on along with them. So the packages that you want, and this is a very important message I want to give with you, is the packages that contain the best vitamins and minerals and sugars and proteins are the packages that have been developed over how many years? 4,000? No, 100,000, 2 million, whatever you want. I'm not going to get into your philosophy. But however long this plant's been going on, it's taken that many years for these packages to be properly developed and to support life. And so, yes, they should be in their original packages. Do you know that plants contain 11 of the 13 vitamins? They make 11 of the 13 vitamins. One is not a vitamin, that's D. And the only other vitamin that plants don't have is B12, which comes from bacteria. Plants make all the essential fats. That means all the omega-3, all the omega-6 fats are made by plants. No animal makes omega-3 fat. Fish has omega-3 fat because it ate algae. It can't make omega-3 fat. All the essential amino acids are made by plants. Are we starting to get a consistent message here? Yeah. So, yes, you don't want to eat the refined sugars, and you even want to take it easy on fruits. Some of my patients who have weight problems, I limit them to a couple of fruits a day, and if they have high triglycerides, too much fruit will raise the triglycerides or fat in their blood. So fruit is kind of a dessert, a delicacy, a little rich, so we have to limit the fruits a bit in patients too. And honey would apply, and molasses and maple syrup would be that way too. Certainly.
What about a raw diet? If a person is dying of a disease, would you consider it to be an extreme to go on a 100% raw diet? And how could you possibly get enough calories? And people with low blood sugar problems cannot dump huge amounts of juice in their system.
Okay, raw diet's a very timely question because this is the new fad for Hollywood, is raw diets. And raw diets, certainly there's some advantages. You know, when anybody says anything to you, there's always a little bit of truth to it. So whenever you hear anything from anybody, no matter how hard it is to believe, always look for the nugget of truth and then try and expand on it based on what you know. The truth about raw food is it's less digestible, so you're going to lose more weight, and your blood sugars are going to be lower on a raw diet of raw vegetables. But just as you said, how can you survive on broccoli, cauliflower, sprouts, and carrots? You can't. There's not enough calories. So what do raw fooders eat? They eat fat and sugar. They live on nuts and seeds and fruit. It's a fat, sugar diet. You say, well, I know raw fooders that don't do that. Yeah, they live on salads and they dump a ton of olive oil over the top. It's a high-fat diet. It is not a diet that's sustainable in good health. So I do not recommend an all-raw diet. Do I recommend raw foods? Sure. Are there some advantages? Yes. But your diet should be starch-based. Most starches have to be cooked. You can't eat raw brown rice. Raw soybeans will make you sick. Raw beans will break your teeth. You cannot eat a starch-based diet of raw food. And so I wouldn't send you that way. There's a whole article I wrote on unhealthy vegans. There are a whole bunch of vegans out there. These are pure vegetarians who I consider very unhealthy. These are what I call the dough boys. The dough boys eat sugar and white flour. You know the dough that Mama used to make with the pie and used to eat the dough? These are the dough boys. Now there's a variation of the dough boy called the wino boy. The wino boy is a pure vegetarian, lives on wine. There are a lot of alcoholic vegetarians, believe it or not. Then there's the soy boys. The soy boys live on fake pepperoni, fake hot dogs, fake burgers. This is fake food. This is not healthy. These fake foods should be a small part of your meal plan at most. They are delicacies at most. Do not make them the center of your meal plan. And then there's the greasy boy. The greasy boy lives on a high-fat vegan diet, and they can be 40, 50, 60% fat with all the olive oil, nuts and seeds and avocados, and it's just a solid ball of grease, and they look like they're fat and greasy. And then there are the raw fooder boys. That's all I got. So there's going to be some very unhealthy vegetarians. And by the way, I am not a vegetarian. I lost $50,000 3 weeks ago because I'm not a vegetarian. I lost $50,000. I probably shouldn't tell you about this. I can't tell you about this. Let's just say I lost $50,000. There was a lawsuit, which I'm not going to say what it is, but there was a lawsuit that was settled that gave money to vegetarians because somebody was serving French fries that weren't vegetarian. But I'm not going to tell you who it is. And I was supposed to get $50,000, but somebody said, well, McDougall's not a vegetarian, so he doesn't qualify. You see why I'm not a vegetarian is because I go to vegetarian conferences. I talk at most of the national conferences. And you know already that I'm not out for a popularity contest. Never. Okay, so I say what's on my mind. And there are a lot of very unhealthy vegetarians in the audience that I feel for because their intentions are good, they just don't get it. And so they're living on one of the 4 unhealthy vegan diets I just told you about, and they're very sick people. And so I tell them, I am not going to be a vegetarian until you guys start taking care of the most important animal I know. They're all into animal rights, right? They don't want to hurt the cow, so they hurt themselves and their wife and their children with this lousy diet. So I said, you got to start taking care of the most important animal there is, which is the human, or I'm not going to be a vegetarian. And to prove it, I eat turkey every other Thanksgiving, and I will always do that. So every other Thanksgiving is kind of ritual in our home. I get this little piece of turkey about 2 by 2, and it's tough, but I do it for the cause. And I am not a vegetarian, and I won't be a vegetarian. And I lost $50,000. But I'm not telling you who was going to. Well, 720 days of the year I am, but that one day I'm not. Yes.
I've been running into an idea called glycemic index. Can you talk about that?
Well, glycemic index is one quality of the food. Glycemic index is the rise in blood sugar, how high it rises for how long. It is one quality of the food. What people have done, people who write health food books, is they take one quality of a food and they expand it into a whole philosophy. So you have insulin index, which is what all these high protein diets are based on. You have the glycemic index, which is another one. It's just one quality of the food. We don't know the full implications of this. David Jenkins, who was a guest on my television show a couple years back, who invented glycemic index, he still doesn't know what the significance is. But they blow it into a whole book. Well, let me tell you how silly glycemic index is. A potato has a worse, higher glycemic index than white sugar. Fructose has the lowest glycemic index there is. Fructose, like high fructose corn syrup. Fructose is 20. White sugar is 100. Potatoes are like 115. Fructose is empty calories. It is the sugar that raises cholesterol and triglycerides more than any other sugar there is. And yet it's the best thing is because it has the lowest glycemic index. It's just nonsense. You have to take in all the qualities of the food. And you say, well, I don't know enough about all the qualities of the food. Neither do I. But I do know that God did not make a mistake in designing the foods. I know that for sure. There's a lot of other things I don't know. Anybody know John Scharfenberg? Okay, John Scharfenberg, he's one of my heroes also. I haven't seen John in years. I hope he's well. But I remember one of our most famous conversations, one that changed my life. John and I were in a little fight. I used to like to get in fights with people when I used to think I knew everything. And John and I were in a little fight, and I was telling him this research and that research and that research and this research. John says, it doesn't matter. Now, John Scharfenberg knows the medical literature backwards and forwards. In fact, his brother was a professional researcher. He knew the research better than anybody I knew, and he says, medical research doesn't matter. I said, well, what do you mean? He says, it's in the Bible. He says, it's in the Bible, it's got to be true. I got mad at him. I said, how could you be such an unprofessional person to say such a thing? Well, as I've matured and started to understand things, John was so right. There's so much basic truth out there, and the Bible is one of those sources. And if the scientific research doesn't agree with the Bible, as John says, then it's got to be wrong. Now, I told John he was wrong then, but John was right. And the older I get, the more I know how true that is. I don't know all the answers, glycemic index, insulin index, all this other garbage, but I know one thing for sure, that nature did it right the first time. And if you abide by the rules, you'll do just fine. Yes?
Dr. McDougall, my husband and I are both vegan and hopefully not one of the 4 that you
Oh,
described. But we drink soy milk, and lately we've been hearing some bad things about carrageenan, and I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Well, say it again, carrageenan. That's the thickener. I researched that in terms of breast cancer and whatever, and the research is extremely weak. So we still use it and plan to continue to use it. As far as soy products go, I think you should keep soy as a delicacy, like I said. We use it. We make, like a first night, our last night of the program, we have chocolate pudding made of soy milk as a treat. That's after they've had their blood tests. Okay. And we serve a little soy on some of the dishes, but it's always, we teach them as a delicacy. We don't have soy burgers. We do have soy hot dogs one day. That's the most soy we have in our program. So I think you should keep it as a delicacy. It's high protein. It's deficient in a lot of the nutrients that the plant foods had, even the original soybean had. And I think that what they're doing is they're blowing something out of proportion when they say it's bad for your hormones, causes breast cancer, thyroid disease, and so on. I've read that research backwards and forwards, and they're making a big deal out of nothing. Out of too little, they're making a big deal out of too little. I don't know where the money comes from, but I know some of the people who are primarily behind it. And I know them personally, and they are fat, sickly people. So whatever they know, it ain't working for them.
Okay, thank you.
Always look at that. Do you ever bother to look at who's talking to you? Do you ever bother to watch do you ever look at Atkins before he slipped on ice in New York and fell in... Do you ever look at that guy? I mean, he had jowls down to here. When I debated in front of the USDA, I was preparing for the lecture, and I said to Mary's my best mentor here, I said, now when Atkins says his diet is so effective and so easy to follow, you know what I'm going to say, Mary? I'm going to say, okay, chubby, now it's time to stand up and take off your coat. She said, don't do that, John, that's too negative. So I didn't do it. But I mean, 3/4 of the people I debate, I wouldn't want to know what they eat. Yes, I would. I'd want to know what they ate, so I didn't eat it. They look terrible. Yes.
Yeah, I'm a member of a natural food co-op in Sacramento.
Yes.
And they have a lot of literature about mucus-producing foods. And they claim that dairy, wheat, and corn and products like that produce mucus, and stay away from it.
Okay.
You ever heard anything
Yeah,
on
well,
that?
sure. Oh, this is old thinking. Old. I mean, this is not that's not right. It's old. It's been around for a long time. Dairy is certainly mucus producing, as I just showed you. And in some people, wheat will cause allergies. In fact, if you look at the elimination diet, which I put out over 20 years ago, if you aren't doing well by the basic diet, which is vegan, starch-based vegetables and fruits, the next thing you eliminate is wheat and corn and citrus, because they are highly allergic in many people. I still use grains. I think grains are a good part of a healthy diet, but there are some people who are sensitive, particularly to wheat and corn, and if you are, you need to get away from them. But it's not common. And you can be sensitive to anything. So there is some truth to that message. But we still use wheat products in our diet extensively.
Hi, John. I thank you for being here today. It's been so wonderful. My question is for women who have extremely large breasts. And since vitamin D is the sunshine vitamin, I've been told that a lot of women who don't absorb vitamin D have swelling of the breasts. And as you know, a lot of people go in for breast reduction. Do you know anything about that? Can you tell us?
Okay, the question is vitamin D and breast size. I've never heard of a relationship. And I can tell you that in all my years in medicine, which has been over 30 years, more than that, it's been over 35 years, I can tell you one of the happiest operations that I've ever seen women get is breast reduction. One of the most unhappy operations I've ever seen women get is a breast enlargement. Yeah.
Hey, John, I was wondering if you guys have figured out how much it's going to cost to sue the dairy industry and whether that's in the works.
How much does it cost to sue the dairy industry? We're going to start out small with the Heart Association, okay? And they're on notice, by the way. This is nothing I'm telling out of classroom. They're on notice that that's the next step is I'm going to sue them. We're going to start with them. The dairy industry should be next. But, you understand what we're dealing with. These people have such deep pockets. How could somebody like myself afford to do such a thing? I can't unless I have a lot of help. And if people think it's worthwhile, and I think it is, I think, I know hundreds of thousands of people are dying and suffering because of this dishonesty. I have no hesitation in telling them this. Listen, everything I told you today about dairy is in my newsletter, which is on the website, which I'm sure they have read, I have no doubt. In fact, they know so much about me that I was told about 5 years ago, I used to fly airplanes. I was told by one person who was talking to Greg Miller, he told her, you know, flying airplanes is dangerous. McDougall ought to know that. So, you know, they know everything that I write. I don't have any trouble at all telling them that I'm concerned. I've debated these people for 20 years. The problem is I'm so small, I'm so insignificant, and they can dump so much money into the dishonesty, it makes no difference at all.
Unless you did class action.
Well, class action, but, you know, I don't know how to start. You know how to do it? Somebody want to join me? Some great attorney out there want to do it? The first attorney I dealt with said, well, you know, I usually charge $300 an hour. I'll work for you for $200. I said, look, I do this for free. How much do you care about this? Anybody out there want to work for free? No. Anyway, the dairy industry knows everything about me. And it's too bad.
Yes. My wife is the one who emails you about that person with kidney problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking at literally months for dialysis, kidney transplant. I keep telling my friend Carl down there to take care of our kidneys because he keeps looking at me strange when I say that, but I'm serious. Not really, Carl. I don't expect that. Anyway, my wife and I, we started your diet Friday, seriously, for last Friday. So
Good.
I can hardly wait 6 months, a year from now to see what happens. I'm curious about carbonation. I like drinks with carbonation, not necessarily Coke or Pepsi, but I drink a drink that has carbonation that has no sodium or
Sure, I think
sugar.
there's no problem at all with sparkling water.
It's not.
Did you get my email back this morning?
No, I don't believe we've read it, but we will when we go home.
Well, I sent you an email this morning.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And you will do better than you ever thought you would. But the only card on the table, I have to tell you, and again, I'm not here to win a popularity contest, the only card on the table is whether you're going to play it and you're going to change your diet. Because what will happen to you will be an absolute miracle. I've seen it dozens of times before, and the only decision you have to make is that you've had enough. You have to say to yourself, just like so many of my patients have said, is I have had enough. I've had more rich food than 99.99% of these people that walk this earth, and another steak ain't worth dying for. And once you say that, you can have your health back.
Yes, hello. I enjoyed your talks very much. I have basically a two-part question. The first part is I constantly keep hearing information about staying out of the sun, don't sunbathe because you're going to get skin cancer.
Yes.
But I happen to know there was a study done over a period of time on the lifeguards in Australia who have one of the lowest cancer rates of anywhere in the world. So
Yes.
I'd like to have you comment about that. And then the second part of the question is, would you please comment about eating for your blood type?
Okay. First question about the sun. I think sunlight is essential for good health. The problem is that you and I were supposed to get the amount of sun that they have up in Scotland. And instead we live in California, and I used to live in Hawaii. So because we live out of our environment, what we were evolved over many years in terms of skin pigmentation didn't fit when we moved south. So that's the problem. So we easily overdo it. And sun damage is a very real thing. And it can suppress the immune system. As you read this month's newsletter, which comes out tomorrow, you'll see that too much sunlight actually suppresses the immune system. So a little bit is good, the right amount. And if you're a dark-skinned person, you need 6 times as much skin or sun as a white, light-skinned person. Second, as far as the blood type diet, blood type. This is a good one. I love the blood type diet. They have convinced people, I'm ready for you, I'm ready for you. They've convinced you that based on your blood type depends upon what you should eat. For example, if you're type O, you should eat meat because that's what Europeans are, mostly O, so they eat meat. And if you're type A, you should eat rice because that's what most Asians are, is type A. You know why I'm so happy? It's because you're all ready for my new book. My new book that's coming out next year is called The Shoe Size Diet. Yes, folks, if you have big shoes, you eat meat. If you wear little shoes, you eat rice. $30 a book paid in advance. Hey, if you believe the blood type, you'll buy the shoe size diet. We could go on too. If that doesn't work, I'll have the ear size. What about breast size diet? I mean, I could write books, a new book every year for you guys. Your friends, not you, Yes.
Dr. McDougall, there is discussion of when you eat fresh fruits and vegetables that when you break it down, you're swallowing live enzymes. The question that I have is when you swallow live enzyme, which is a protein, drops into the hydrochloric acid of the stomach, my understanding is that the protein would be denatured, and I don't see how it could be alive or active. Can you address this?
This is a good question, and I won't be able to give you the full answer because I just plain and simple don't know. But it's a question I've thought about, just like you. You're obviously a medical or health person. You've thought about this. It's whether there's a value to consuming raw foods because of its enzyme or protein content. I used to say, just like you said, and I really haven't changed it a lot, that it's all digested by stomach acid and amylases and lipases and so on, and it's all gone all into basic amino acids and sugars and so on. So none of this goes into the body, but I know that's not true because intact food proteins do get into the body, and this is the basis for molecular mimicry, which is the autoimmune diseases that we talked about in terms of the pancreas. So we know whole protein, like cow protein gets in, pork protein gets in, and I'm sure whole plant proteins get in. What their value is, I don't know. And maybe it's in the literature, I just need to learn more about it.
Is that whole protein or is it
protein fragments?
Yes.
Both. And also, but these are people with leaky guts. And the leaky gut occurs, there's a one-cell barrier between the gut and the bloodstream, and that gets denuded, it gets damaged. And it gets damaged by unhealthy diet, by toxins, by taking non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like Motrin and Advil. It gets denuded, and once it's damaged, then the gut becomes permeable. Now whole food proteins and segments of food proteins and whole bacterial proteins now get into the bloodstream. And this is the whole science of autoimmune disease, which accounts for rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, arteritis, in other words, atherosclerosis. It accounts for diabetes and so on. Okay? What do you want to do? How about if we just finish this line? I'll do it real quickly. Yes.
Dr. McDougall, for someone who's vegan and has glucose intolerance, what would you recommend?
Has who kind of tolerance?
Glucose intolerance.
Glucose intolerance?
Yes.
You mean like sugars?
Well, fasting blood sugar over 119, 121, and so
glucose intolerance.
Yes.
Like it's a little too high.
Yes.
Okay, what I'd recommend is the same thing. It would be exercise program and eating more whole foods and staying away from the simple sugars like fruit.
Staying away from the fruit.
Yeah, the simple sugars like fruit. And with some weight loss, the glucose tolerance almost always goes away.
Yeah, but if you're normal weight already, would you need snacks?
Well, you're trying to get the sugar down, not
right.
up. So eating more frequent meals as opposed to big meals would help get it down.
Okay.
And also exercise and also eating the foods more whole would help.
Whole.
We got a call. My daughter had a blood test. She's 28 years old. You'll meet her if you ever sign up for a trip or for the clinic or anything you need help with. Her name is Heather. And she had a blood test last week, and the doctor's office called her out of concern because her blood sugar was 46. And they told her that maybe she ought to be eating more. And she came to me and I said, well, that's a normal blood sugar. Now, not the usual blood sugar you see in America, but I mean, for example, rural Africans, their average blood sugar is 46.
Wow.
The average American's probably 100. And so it's so surprising. But anyways, of course, she's a very healthy lady. So I think you can do something about it, but I certainly wouldn't fret over it. You see, a lot of folks, and I've heard this, somebody asked me about homocysteine earlier. Some of you worry about your cholesterol being too high. You're worried a little bit about your sugar being too high. You've got all these little things going on that aren't perfect. And what you have to decide, and this was last year's lecture, you have to decide whether extra effort for these not perfect things will do you more good than harm, like taking cholesterol-lowering medication or taking vitamins for the homocysteine. And in most cases, if you eat really good and exercise, there's very little else you should do. Now, I say in most cases, I do that with some hesitation because I will treat people with high cholesterol with a real high history of heart disease with cholesterol-lowering medications, just like any doctor would. So, you know, I think that you ought to take consolation and joy in the fact that you're really healthy people because you eat well and exercise well. And the only time I want you to think about these bad things is when you sit down to breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then you just eat a little bit better.
Dr. McDougall, I have osteoporosis, and I'm very reluctant to fill the prescription. Is there something I could tell?
For osteoporosis?
Yes, I have a prescription from Kaiser, and I...
What do you want you to take, Fosamax?
That's probably what this
Yeah,
says.
probably Fosamax.
And I'm so reluctant because I don't like to take drugs.
In the McDougall program for women, I discuss that in great detail. You can get that in the library, you can get it from the office or Amazon.com. I discuss it in great detail what to do. And generally what I do is this. I don't prescribe Fosamax. No, I just don't do it for a whole bunch of, because of the side effects. Not that it doesn't work, not that I would criticize another doctor for doing it. I just haven't found the need to use it. What I do with women who think they have osteoporosis, and they think they have it because they got a bone mineral density test. Fine. You don't have the bones of a 20-year-old woman. Big surprise. Okay, so you have to ask yourself, is your good diet low in protein, high in alkaline materials and exercise, keeping your bones strong? And the way I have women figure that is I have them get another bone density test in 2 or 3 years and see if there's been progress. Now, if they continue to lose bone density at a very accelerated rate, then we might do some other things. Like they could take antacid pills, like Tums, not for the calcium, but for the alkaline material. That's one approach. They could also take some herbs that have estrogen-like effects. And as a last resort, which I'm very concerned about, but have used, is they could use hormone replacement therapy. Fosamax would be way down the list of things I'd prescribe.
Yes,
So,
I've had this prescription for at least 6 years already.
Yeah. For 6 years, you've had the prescription.
Well, I mean, I've known that told me I had the test.
Yeah, well, see, it must have worked.
And I finally...
You're still around. Kept it in your pocket, it was good luck. Thank you. Yes.
Hello, Dr. John McDougall. My question is, I'm a vegetarian now, maybe for a couple of months. I've read your book, the McDougall Program for Women. I stopped eating dairy products, soy products, and also nuts, because I think you said you should limit nuts. Well,
if you want to lose weight, you should limit nuts for sure.
Okay, because I've lost over 10 pounds, and I didn't want to lose any weight.
You look trim.
So, should I just increase like the nuts and?
This is a very, very good question, which deserves a second of answer. One of the problems that people have, quote problems, is getting too thin. All right. About 8 months ago, the people on our program at that time, they had a little conspiracy going. And they came up to me, well-intentioned, they said, "Don't you think Mary's a little thin?" And I said, "Well, not really. She looks good to me." And I said, "Did you notice our dietitian?" "Yeah, she's a little thin too." I said, "Did you notice our psychologist?" "Yeah, he's a little thin too." And I kept going down the line. I said, "Have you noticed a little trend here?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, that's what happens when people eat well, is they get trim." Now, I know you're concerned about it, so I don't mean to make light of your concern. The way you add more calories is, the safest thing to do is add more processed food, like whole grains. Okay, like wheat, bagels, whole wheat bread. That's the easiest, maybe the safest thing. The next thing to do would be to add more juices and fruits. Like, for example, Carl Lewis has been my patient for 13 years. You know, the runner? If you read his new vegetarian book, he mentions my name twice in the introduction, so I feel fair to tell you this because he still follows our program, still is my patient. Carl Lewis ran into problems because he must have been burning 6, 8, 10,000 calories a day when he was on the track circuit. And so we had to add dried fruits and fruit juices and some nuts and seeds to his diet to get it meet his calorie needs. So I'd add that, and then I'd add nuts, seeds, avocados, olives, and lastly, soybean products. That's what I do. You'll have no trouble. I can design you a diet higher in calories than the American diet if I select the vegetable foods properly. But I think probably what you're going through, because you look good to me, probably what you're going through is a new image adjustment. But if not, you can change that. Nobody ever comes up and tells me I'm too thin. So obviously I must be doing okay. Salt intake, all right? Oh, salt, yeah, salt will help you take in more calories too because the food tastes better.
And if I eat like whole grain cereals, it's like, well, you said you don't like milk, but soy, or what can I
Absolutely don't
put
drink
over
milk.
the milk?
Do I have to do that lecture again?
Yeah.
Yeah. It would be fine to take in whole grain cereals. You'll have no trouble really if you just liberalize things a little bit in terms of breads and bagels and pastas. And those of you who want to lose weight more, you listen to this message too, because those are the things you eliminate. And dried fruits and more fruits. And lastly, nuts, seeds, avocados, and olives. You'll have no trouble at all.
I've had interstitial cystitis for 12 years, and my frequency got up as high as 32 with intense pain. So I was interested in trying to find ways to solve this. Well, I went on to the Hallelujah diet.
Yes.
And the pain went away, which
Good.
was good, and the frequency kind of decreased. Well, I found out about your book, and I not only went on your 12-day program, but I did it for 30 days.
Good.
Well, I went around for 30 days sounding like a motorboat, and I had a lot of rumbling in my stomach,
Okay.
and my frequency increased. So what did I do wrong?
All right. She went on the Hallelujah diet, which is a good diet. Okay? And it's a great diet. They use some things that we don't necessarily support, but there's nothing about the general diet that I would feel anything negative about, so you made a good choice. A couple of things could have happened. One is, even if you'd stayed on the Hallelujah diet, it's possible your symptoms would have come back. Second possibility is maybe you, in the Hallelujah diet, maybe you didn't eat as much wheat, because as we talked about, wheat products are the most common vegetable food to cause allergy. And interstitial cystitis, bladder, is due to an allergy, often a food allergy. So what I do with people who have interstitial cystitis, first of all, of course, is the dairy, which is probably where you got the major benefit. Okay. And then the next, when you get into the vegetable foods, it would be wheat, corn, and citrus. And there's a whole diet that's on the website and also in the books called the Elimination Diet. It's under Common Diseases Allergy. And there it'll teach you an elimination diet, and you might be able to sort through what's bothering you by doing that diet. It's sweet potatoes, non-citrus fruits, brown rice, green and yellow vegetables, all thoroughly cooked. And you follow that for a week. If things go away, then you start adding things back to your diet to test what gives you trouble. As far as the gas goes, I'm guilty. Our diet has more gas than the American diet, but it smells better. It doesn't have all those putrefying animal products in it, and gas is natural. Have you ever ridden a horse? You know, if you want to decrease the gas, there's a whole section. It's in the August. I probably shouldn't use any of these four-letter words here in this audience, but I'll tell you the real title of it. It's the August 2002 newsletter. It's called Bad Farts Meet Stinks. And it'll tell you all about how to get rid of the gas.
Well, after I went on the vegan diet, I was able to eat foods that I hadn't been able to eat before.
Yes.
And the frequency kind of decreased. But why would it increase on your diet?
Maybe you added more wheat or something else, citrus fruits or something else that was troublesome. But I would search it out with the elimination diet. It's a great tool, and it costs nothing. It does you no harm. But it could be something like wheat that's more common in our diet than the Hallelujah diet. Yeah.
Dr. McDougall, hi. Thank you so much for embracing Dr. Roy Swank's MS program.
Oh, yes.
And can you let me know, please, how the MS program differs from the heart program? I've watched the 6 videos and...
Okay. Dr. Roy Swank, I have all these heroes. You think what I do is original. Forget it. There are so many people who came before me who have done the same thing or very similar. I would have to say my most claim to originality is Mary, in the sense that she brought, I think, the most livable program that has ever been invented in terms of following a healthy diet. As far as the basic principles, the sincerity, the interest in spreading the message, so many great people came before me. Nathan Pritikin, Roy Swank, Walter Kempner, Daniel, I mean, I could go on and on and on of people who tried to share this message. Roy Swank was head of neurology at the University of Oregon for 23 years, head of the neurology department. He has shown, he's 94 years old now, he's a good friend. In fact, I have taken over the Roy Swank program in terms of treating MS patients, and you'll find all that information on the website. He's treated people with MS, and what he finds is if you have early MS, you follow the diet, the chance of you getting worse over the next 50 years is less than 5%. If you follow any other program, I don't care how expensive it costs, I don't care whether it makes the stock market page 10 times this year because of the profits of the company that's selling it, I don't care what it is, any other drug, any other approach, the risk of you being dead, bedridden, or wheelchair bound is 50% in 10 years. But the Roy Swank program has no money behind it. And so our program is similar enough that Roy Swank has endorsed it to the point where I now have legal control over a big aspect of it. And we run that program for MS. Okay, last question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McDougall. I've used your books and so forth to teach and share with people for years. And one question I have is that if you're eating whole foods and if you're eating too much fat, would it show up, uncooked, not trans fatty acids, would it show up as overweight if you're eating too much fat? Would it show up in your deposits in your arteries? How would it show up? How would you
Okay, the
notice
question is if you're eating too much fat, how would it show up? That's a difficult question. It may show up all the ways you said. Abnormal blood sugar, too much fat, too much greasy skin, pimples, greasy hair. These are the common ways it shows up. But I'm going to end with this, is the human body is an absolute miracle. You're talking about your amount of fat, too much, is minor compared to what the average American consumes. So it probably, most people will never show up. The human body is a miracle. Think of what it survives, and I personally have tested it. It will survive 2 packs of cigarettes, a half a bottle of whiskey every day, and grease, and it lives. So you may not see it. Hopefully you won't in your lifetime, but I can bet you instead of testing your limits of survival, I can bet you a better attitude would be instead to ask this question: how could I best support my body to express its best personal appearance, its best function, and the longest possibility of living in good health? And that's the question that should be on everybody's mind, not how much abuse will it survive, which is what most of it has done. I'll answer the rest of it later. Thank you very much.